Okay, so I'd love for you to get into Astral Reiki. Now, I've heard about Reiki before, but particularly, specifically speaking
Mhm.
about Astral Reiki, how do we differ between what we know as Reiki and what Astral Reiki is?
So, okay, so to describe the process of Reiki for just a moment, the process of Reiki is basically we're channeling our life force energy in, not our, but life force energy in general through our crown chakra all the way down to the tips of our toes and then back up again and out through our hands. That is how traditional Reiki works. The process of astral Reiki is a little bit different in that I am actually leaving my body. So, my consciousness or soul or astral body, whatever you want to call it, is leaving my body and going over to where my client is and channeling that life force energy through my astral body rather than my physical body. So that makes for a much cleaner and more intense experience.
Mm, interesting. So, what can you say could be the physiological effects and energetic effects when you're doing Astral Reiki?
So they're going to be similar to traditional Reiki. You know, we're still channeling life force energy, whether that's through the physical body or through the astral body. But with astral Reiki, because I'm outside of my body, I can use my clairvoyance to really see much more easily what's going on in a person's body. So if they've got something that's, out of tune or something like that, we can work on, a lot of times it's the liver, bringing the liver back into tune with the rest of the body and, emptying out anything that they've got in their chakras that don't belong there, clearing parasites and just that kind of thing. Astral Reiki, yes, it is Reiki, but it does also tend to have a precision effect when it comes to energy work. It's easier to see what's going on in somebody's body.
I'd love for you to tell me some of the things that you have found astral projecting and healing people. What are some of the common things that you have found in people's energy fields?
Sure. So parasites are incredibly common. Pretty much, even my more spiritually inclined clients, sometimes have parasites, and they're basically these little. They vary in size, but they always start out as like these little leech thingies that you'll find like in people's minds is really common, or anywhere on the body, really. That's a very, very common thing that I will find, remove, and transmute. Another really common thing that I tend to find is a lot of inflammation in the body. I can take my guesses as to why everybody's so inflamed, but there's definitely a lot of inflammation in the body. So, whenever I find that, I tend to not necessarily use Reiki strictly. I have access to this blue light that tends to be a lot more soothing than Reiki energy. So, whenever I see inflammation, I tend to use that blue light instead, because it has a much more soothing effect on the body and it helps with inflammation in various places, but it's usually starting from the liver. And I also use that blue light to help calm people's nervous systems because I tend to find that most people's nervous systems are also quite overactive. So you can usually see that a lot when you look at someone's fascia, because their fascia will be inflamed, and then you can kind of see the nerves underneath the fascia are inflamed as well. So that if you take that back into the root of the cerebellum and the amygdala, usually the amygdala is like moving way faster than it's supposed to be. And The cerebellum usually tends to be inflamed. So we just calm all of that down with this blue light that I gained access to a while ago. So that's just some things. But
Interesting. Tell me more about this blue light. How did you come in touch with the blue light? What is it like? Is this source energy? Is this a part of your own energy field? How would you describe that?
so I mean, we're gonna get a little weird, but this blue light was granted to me by the Arcturians. I get the feeling it's a fairly common thing that they grant to energy workers. I think a lot more people are using it than they realize are using it. I didn't even sit down and have a confab with them or anything one day. It was just like one day I needed soothing energy and I was like, I need some soothing energy. Somebody help me out with that. And some Arcturians came forward and they said, here you go. And so so now I have it.
That's amazing. That is amazing. I love that. Okay. Speaking of the Arcturians, I'd love to know, how did your contact first happen with them? Was that through you asking for the help that you needed for yourself? How did that happen? Or was this like a connection that you had prior to anything that you're currently describing?
Oh, that connection's been there for a while now. Probably 5 or 6, maybe 7 years ago. I can't remember anymore. But I was in an acupuncture session with someone who's very close with the Arcturians, and they very much wanted to get in touch. So they used her as kind of a conduit, and we had a conversation then that I no longer remember. It's been like a long time, but just a basic introductory, how do you do kind of thing. And we've been in conversation ever since then. It's only on the spiritual plane. You know, I'm not into the whole being physically abducted by aliens or something. That's a little too intense for me, and I like to hang out in the astral realm instead. So I know some people have, and some people are into that. It's not my lane. So
That is hilarious. That is so funny. Okay, okay. So, all right. So, tell me about your relationship with the Arcturians then. Outside of healing, do you have a relationship with them? Do you um channel? Do you like, what is your relationship like with them outside of healing?
I mean, it's fine. We hang. We're friends. I'm supposed to make this spiritual. Okay. So I made them angry once. That was fun. But in all reality, it's a working relationship for the most part. Um, I ask for help whenever I get in over my head in a spiritual situation, whether that's with a client or just wandering around. Um, and they are always there for me, which I really appreciate. They're very love and light people, and maybe a little bit on the robotic side, but they're nice. I don't know. I guess they're just like anybody else, really. It's funny because people, I've heard people describe them as relatively emotionless and robotic, and that can be true, but like they have an ego just like anybody else, and they can be angry and they can get rattled, and they can show emotion just like we can. It's kind of on a different frequency. So
What did you do to get
I
them
don't know if that answered that
upset?
question or your question. Oh, okay. This okay. I was really punchy. Okay, I had not slept in a while and I forget what was going on, but there was a personal thing that was happening and I was displeased. Um, but I was receiving Reiki and they had been knocking on the door for a while. They wanted to have a conversation about something, but I wasn't listening and I didn't want to hear it and I just didn't want to deal with them. So they came through my Reiki practitioner instead, and it was like the Galactic Council or something. Um, and I was reading this Dolores Cannon book at the time, talking, and it was like every third person was talking about the Galactic Council and how awesome it was, and like how they were a member, and blah 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 blah. And I was punchy, and I'm a little punchy all the time. So I was extra punchy that day. And when I was told it was the Galactic Council who wanted to, like, I don't know, do a DNA upgrade or something. Like, they just really expected me to be in awe of them. And my response was, oh my gosh, that's so basic. I'm so embarrassed right now. And they did not
Oh my
appreciate that.
God. Oh, wow. Yeah, that was very punchy.
It was. I think I definitely subverted their expectations, but they had been hanging out with me for a while now and they should have known better. Um but you know, you just get used to, I think, when you're in a situation like that, you get very used to people being in awe of you. And so when I subverted those expectations, they were irritated, they were angry, and you could see it. I was not behaving the way I was supposed to, and they did not like it.
That is hilarious. That is hilarious. I've never heard anything like that before. Thanks for sharing that, though.
Sure.
All right. So, what I like to get into though is how how did you initially get into energy healing? Like, what was this initiation that got you into energy healing? Why did you choose this path?
That is a long story. Um, we'd have to go back to my 20s, which I am not in anymore. But when I was in my 20s, I was in a rather severe amount of pain for most of my 20s. It it's honestly hard to describe the level of pain that can exist inside a body that you can just kind of almost get used to. But then when I was around 29-ish, it really started to ramp up in a like really severe manner. So I went to the doctor because that's what you do. You go to the doctor and say, "Hey doc, I'm in a lot of pain," and then the doctor goes, "Hey, would you like some steroids and some opiates because that will totally fix everything. You can just live with this forever." And I didn't like that answer. You know, nobody does. It's not a good answer. So I started doing a lot of research online, trying to figure out how to deal with this pain, which I now understand was inflammation from a liver that was very overtaxed with anger. But I didn't understand that at the time. So I eventually found massage therapy and started seeing this amazing massage therapist who was at Massage Envy of all places. Um, like, don't know how she ended up there because she was way better than that. But I actually still see her once a week. She's amazing. And if you're in the Knoxville area, her name is Luella, and she's awesome. But in any case, I was going through massage and working on, trying to heal from all of this inflammation and working on getting it out of my system and doing a lot of research on how to fix this and, more spiritual ways to deal with this pain that I was in when I found acupuncture and started doing that. And while that did offer some relief, the pain of having acupuncture was really severe. It was a bit more than I could take comfortably. So I was reading a book, and I don't even remember what book it was anymore, but they were talking about how Reiki could really help supplement acupuncture and massage and how that was supposed to really help. And, I had never even heard of Reiki at that point. This was many years ago. And I just thought, what on earth is that? I need to go do some research. So I found a Reiki therapist probably 2 or 3 weeks after that, had my very first Reiki session, and bawled my ever loving eyes out. Just like ugly cry all over myself. It was gross, and I was so embarrassed. And just, I mean, like, I can never see this woman ever again. She saw me cry. That's terrible. And so I didn't go back to her for a solid 6 months, even though it was a hugely transformative experience. She actually really helped with my pain a fair amount, but I had to get over myself first before I could go back. And so about 6 months later, I went back, and, it was it's like, wow, I feel so much better after this. This has made such a huge difference. So I started seeing her once a week too. And that kind of started my journey, like my real spiritual journey. It helped me get my telepathy under control and my precognition under control, and just like all of these psychic things that had just been running wild in my brain for years, and I had no idea how to deal with it. I could finally take the time to really get that to a place where it was useful and not trying to like destroy me, basically. Um, and about a year, maybe less, probably more like 6 months in, my Reiki master said, you really need to be doing this.
I love
So
that.
that was, yeah, that was about the time where I took my first Reiki 1 class, probably a couple of months later. And yeah, that is how I got started.
So tell me more about how your precognition abilities used to affect you. Like, what was
Hmm.
happening there? Why weren't you able to kind of work with that in a constructive way before?
So I tend to think this is probably true of most people with precognitive abilities, though I suppose I don't have any data to back this up. I'm not sure how one would get it, but for me specifically, my precognitive abilities were very much tied to my stress levels. So I found that anytime I was really stressed out, which was like most of my life up until that point, even when I was just driving, anytime I wasn't actively in what I was doing, I would find myself in the future, like on accident. And so it was like this inability to be in the present moment because I was constantly in a future moment. And so always knowing what's about to happen next, and knowing to go catch something when it's about to fall, or knowing when somebody's going to die, or knowing like just basically anything except the lottery numbers. I never seem to be in the right place for that one. But having to constantly live in not this moment, it's just, it takes you away from your life.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see how that could play out in that way. And yeah, what's up with that? You never seem to get the lottery numbers, do you?
No, I don't know why. It's I would love to understand that one, but I guess it's just not meant to be, at least not yet.
Oh my goodness. Okay, okay. So how was it like then? Like what was like family life like? What was your spiritual or religious life like? Did any of that impact what you were going through having these abilities? Because based on what you're saying, I'm assuming that you've probably experienced this since childhood or at some point during your youth.
Oh, yes, absolutely. This has been going on very probably since the day I was born. Um, I started going to a Southern Baptist church when I was 5 years old. My mom had me spend the night at my grandmother's house, and then my aunt would take us over to a Baptist church that I probably shouldn't name. And I was growing up in the shadow, not quite in the time of, but in the shadow of the satanic panic, where everybody was freaking out about Dungeons and Dragons and calling it witchcraft, which, like, quite frankly, looking at it now, that's adorable. But it was very much not the reality of the situation. So they sat us down when, oh my goodness, I mean, we probably got our first witchcraft talk when I was about 6. And they really went over pretty much everything that I could do. It's like, the telepathy. If you're talking, if you're listening in on other people's thoughts, and what? I mean, how do they even think about it? I don't even know. If you're predicting the future, if you're, I don't know, following the stars and various other things. That means you're a witch and that you're evil and you're going to hell and you're lucky we don't hang you here and now. And so I was very lucky in that I never actually believed most of what they were telling me. But even as a small child, even if you know that it's not true, there's like this, what if I'm wrong? There's
Mm.
always this, what if I'm wrong? I might be wrong. I'm really young. I don't actually know anything yet, but I really feel like none of this is true. But what if I'm wrong? And I don't know how to control any of this. And I can't tell anybody about this because apparently I'm evil. And like my parents sent me here. So I definitely can't tell them this is happening because they sent me here. So they must believe this too, right? And so it ended up being a very lonely experience. um Very much trying to figure out how to hide it. I was always trying to figure out how to hide it, and it's like just making sure that nobody really knows just how psychic I am, because nothing good can come of that. Somebody will send me away or kill me, or something bad's going to happen if anybody finds out what I can do. um so yeah, no, it wasn't like the funnest way to grow up. It was a fairly constant doing my best to hide
Hmm.
a lot of who I was.
Yeah, I can see that. How have you managed to integrate that into your life now, where you're situated with your parents, with your own beliefs, and maybe your family or your friends, or
Mhm.
anything that you are a part of personally?
So it's a little bit easier now. We switched to a Presbyterian church when I was 12, and that helped a lot. There, that all went away, and the Presbyterians are just a little less weird about witchcraft. So it wasn't quite so much of a conversation piece once I got older. So that created some space the older I got to be a little bit more honest. But lying, it becomes a habit. So it took me a really long time to break that habit and to really start living in truth and start living in my authentic self. And I think, just like everybody else, I'm still trying to figure out who that even is.
Hmm.
But when my parents actually left the church, that was about the time that I decided to get honest, like really honest. And it's like, I'm not a Christian. I don't believe what you believe. And I'm more, I don't know, agnostic or something. And it's one of those, they didn't hang me. They didn't try to stone me to death. They didn't even ostracize me. They were like, "Oh, okay, we kind of figured."
I love
And
that.
like it just ended up not being that big of a deal.
That's great. I love that for you. All right. So, spoken about Reiki, I also know that you work with crystalline energy, and I'd love for you to get into that. Tell me about well, we know what crystals are. I'm pretty sure most of us by now have heard of crystals. For example, quartz, well, rose quartz, like there's just so many of them. But I'd love for you to tell me
Mhm.
how you began to come to like to integrate, I should say, to integrate crystalline energy into your work, and how do you work with it? Like, how does that go?
So a lot of different ways. I do a lot of different things with crystalline energy, and I probably have more crystals than I need, and should probably work on that. But if we want to talk Reiki specifically, when we talk about astral Reiki, I do actually use a pretty specific crystal grid to set the space for any astral Reiki session that I do. And that grid, it consists of rose quartz, because, we all need a little bit of love in our lives, and labradorite. And that's pretty specifically for protection in the astral realm, both for me and my client. But as an added bonus, it helps cope with change, which I really like to incorporate in any session, because most sessions are quite transformative. So it kind of helps ease the client into a new sense of reality. And then I use blue quartz to help with communication, and fluorite. And that's mostly for me because I sometimes stray and it helps me concentrate. And apophyllite, and that's for both of us really. It's to help me see. So, it helps with clairvoyance. And then if my client wants to go on a little journey while they're getting worked on, then it helps with their clairvoyance too. And then amethyst, of course, because we're connecting with higher realms still here, so we need amethyst. And then on the outer perimeter, I do 4 terminated quartz towers for added protection. And then I center the whole thing with a nice big quartz, just clear quartz tower. And that's just for amplification and connection, and just tie the whole thing together. So that's how I work with it in
Mm.
astral Reiki.
That's beautiful. That is so beautiful. I know sometimes it might be a little bit hard to imagine how these energies work together. Um, I don't know. Like, can you like tell us a bit of how this energy from the crystals, how it impacts us, or how that plays into our own energy fields?
So that's actually going to vary somewhat from person to person. It depends on your sensitivity levels. It depends on what your strongest clairs are. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. And it depends on the crystal. So there's a lot of different factors that go into that kind of thing. But I'll just use me as an example, and we can go from there. So I am more of a feeling kind of person. Is like that's really my strongest clair is clairsentience. I can feel the vibes, I can feel all the stuff. And so when I pick up a crystal, I can usually pretty easily tell whether it needs to be charged or it doesn't need to be charged, or if it's ready to be used, that kind of thing. And the way that you do that is it's kind of like there's almost electricity that's pulsing throughout this crystal. So if it needs to be charged, there's going to be less of a charge. Like literally, there's just less electricity in the crystal. But if it doesn't, then that thing's going to be practically buzzing in my hand, like ready to go, ready to work, ready to do something. So that's when I know that it's actually good to go and we can actually work together and do something. So let's just take an example here for a second. This right here that I have in my lap is a very dark fluorite. And it's a dark green fluorite. So it's great for the heart chakra. And it's an incredibly calming and grounding stone. So, for these kinds of things, like when I'm interviewing someone and I know that I'm going to be visible, which that's what we're doing right now. It's like I'm going to be on a podcast. Somebody's going to hear my voice. I am very, very visible right now. That's something that makes me nervous for what seems like obvious reasons, given what I just told you about my childhood. So, this stone is here to help keep me calm and make sure that I stay grounded and in my body and help me pay attention to what's going on. I can tell that that's working because my voice is steady and I'm not, at least frequently, talking really, really fast or really, really high or freaking out. I'm low, I'm relatively slow, and I'm relatively calm. Now, is this going to fix the entire problem of nervousness? No. I mean, we've all got our stuff, but this definitely helps. So that's one example of how you can tell whether or not a crystal is working. Before I put this crystal in my lap, my heart was beating like crazy. But now it's calm and I am fine.
Beautiful.
I'm having fun. I'm exchanging with you. So,
Love that. Love that. How do we know, for example, for some of us who are not sensitive to energy, right? We haven't really, that's probably not our strongest skill, or maybe we're just not that sensitive in that way, right? How do we know the right crystal? What would be the right crystal for us to work with for ourselves?
okay, there's a lot of different ways to go about that. So, if you're not particularly energy sensitive or you're not very secure in your own intuition, that's okay. That's not even that big of a deal. There are so many different compendiums available to you that will give you all the information that you need on whatever crystal you're thinking about. There's the Crystal Bible, and Judy Hall has written, I don't know, like 7 or 8 different books on crystals, maybe more. I have not counted. And she's an excellent resource as far as choosing a crystal goes. Personally, my favorite is not a book at all. There is an app that you can get that's called the Crystal Council. I don't know if it's available on Apple, but it's definitely there on Android. And it's this amazing cross-referencing tool where, you can click on which crystal might be good for your element or your sign or your intention. It's color coded, and I mean, there's so many different ways to cross-reference a crystal. Huge fan, not in any way affiliated, just a fan. So that is one way to go about it. And that's a very, very reasonable and acceptable way to go about choosing a crystal if you're not secure in your intuition. I still recommend, if you're new at this, that you go into a crystal shop. Even if you know what you're looking for, even if you know what you want, it still helps to go into the store and really pick up the crystal, hold it in your left hand, because that's generally your receiving hand. If you're left-handed, please contact me. I'd love to know whether or not that's true for you too. I've never tested it with a left-handed person before, but generally speaking, if you're right-handed, your left hand is your receiving hand, and you just hold that crystal in your hand and basically just ask, is this crystal right for me, and kind of see whether or not you get a response. And, that could be in your head, like yes or no, or there could be an image that flashes before your eyes, or it could get heavier or lighter or warmer or cooler. There's lots of different indications. And if it does actually give you an indication, but you're not sure what that means, you can always literally ask the crystal, can you give me a yes? And then see what it does. And then, can you give me a no? And then see what it does. If you're not feeling anything, or you're not seeing anything, or hearing anything, or tasting or smelling anything, let's cover all the clairs. You can also bring a pendulum with you. And that's a super fun little cheat code, because you can take that pendulum and hold it in your right hand, hold the crystal in your left hand, and ask the pendulum first, while the crystal's in your left hand. They're kind of working together here. Ask the pendulum to give you a yes and then a no. Usually it swings front to back for yes and side to side for no, but that's not always a guarantee. You got to ask, because it might do something different. And then you can basically communicate with the crystal through the pendulum, so that you can get your answers through the pendulum. So that's one thing that you can do if you're not super secure in your intuition yet. It's a great verification tool.
Thank you so much. That was very informative. That's amazing, Scarlett. Okay, so we spoke about the astral Reiki, crystalline energy. Before we started this episode, you were getting into your human design chart, which I thought was really cool. I was just like, I need to ask her about this at some point in time. So here we go. You work with human design as well. And I feel like it's so fascinating how you manage to combine these different modalities into something just so amazing. So I'd love for you to get into that. How do you work with human design? Can you get into what is it, and how, like, what can we learn about ourselves from human design? And then how can we use that to give us information about who we are and our path?
Hmm, that is a big question. I love it. Okay, so there's a few different layers to that. I'll start with the easy one first. The way that I use human design in my business is, I do offer human design readings, so you can do that with me if you'd like. But I also love to get people's human designs whenever I'm doing a Reiki session on them, because that actually informs how I'm gonna basically work with this client. Because if I'm working with a projector, let's say, like a self projected projector, someone like that is going to have a lot of openness in their chart, which is going to make them significantly more energy sensitive than the average person. So, for a person like that, I'm going to go nice and slow and go real easy on the energy, and then slowly ramp it up throughout the session to make sure that I don't overwhelm them. And you can contrast that with someone who's got a lot more definition, probably like a manifesting generator, who at the very least is going to have a defined sacral and a defined throat. And very typically, they have a lot more definition than that. So they're not usually as energy sensitive as someone who's more open, like a self projected projector. So I know that I can go a lot more intensely with this person more quickly. So, because they need a little bit more energy to really get that transformation that they're looking for. So, I don't have to be as careful about the ramping up. We can just go. So that's A. and then you were asking about how people can use human design to transform their lives and understand themselves a little bit better, right? Okay. So I'm going to give you my story just because that's the one that I know the best. I am a somewhat unusual type when it comes to human design. I am what's called a manifester, and manifestors only make up about 9% of the population. And my whole life, I've been tired. For one reason or another, I've been tired. And I
Mm.
have worked my most of my life to try to not be, and to just go and be someone that I'm very much not, and to really act like everybody else, to do all the things, to be capable, to be, on top of it and doing all of the things that everybody else is doing. I can hike that mountain, no problem. You watch. And it's so not me. And so finding out I was a manifester was great, but what really helped me understand myself so much more and so much more deeply was finding out that I am what's called a non-sacral being. So about 70-ish% of the population of humanity is what's called a sacral being. So they're either a generator or a manifesting generator. And a sacral being has what's called a defined sacral center, otherwise known as the sacral chakra. Some of human design is also based off of the Hindu chakra system. So when I talk about centers, you can very much correlate those with the Hindu chakra system. So
Okay.
there's some crossover there. So with a defined sacral center, you basically have consistent access to this life force energy. And in human design, that sacral center, it makes up half of the energy in the chart. There's 9 centers, and that one center makes up half of it. And I do not have consistent access to it. So finding that out was like this permission slip to not have to do everything all the time, and to really let go, and to be able to rest, and to accept that I'm just gonna be more tired than other people sometimes, and that that's okay, and that's literally built into my body mechanics, and there's no changing it. There's
Mm.
only accepting it. There's only accepting that my energy does not work like other people's energy does, and that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. Um, Now, if you look at this from the perspective of a generator or a manifesting generator, something that probably comes up for them a fair amount — I've seen this in literally every single session I've ever given to a generator or a manifesting generator — is that they have been conditioned their entire lives that they have to take life by the horns and make it happen. No matter what, they are doing whatever it takes to reach that goal, and they're going to come up with so much resistance and frustration, and there's going to be like this pervasive thing in their lives, like, this just doesn't feel right, but I know this is what I need to do because society has told me this is what I need to do. This is what life
Yeah.
is. We grab it by the horns. And that's actually a very manifestor thing to do. We're the ones who are supposed to be grabbing those horns, and a generator is actually built to respond. So when a generator, whether they're a manifesting generator or a regular generator — not regular, but just a generator — when they take a step back and really listen in to that defined sacral of theirs, and start actually using that sacral energy the way that it's meant to be used, from this place of response, and really paying attention to those sacral responses, which are also a binary, just like a pendulum. Themes, gotta love it. But that binary, it's kind of like this guttural thing. It goes, uh-huh, or uh-uh, or which is basically just an uh-uh. Um, when you hear that coming out of your mouth, that is really your sacral response that is there to guide you towards, like, basically your life's goals or your life's purpose, that kind of thing. And you can watch as a sacral person starts really listening into that, how much happier they get. There's usually some initial rockiness, because you're changing your life entirely, the whole way you're doing it. Like, that's not going to go smoothly right off the bat. But once you get through that little bit of rockiness, it's like really watching a generator get into that and kind of thing, and really watching that responsiveness. It's like they just light up from within, and they get access to all of this energy that was being repressed before because they weren't paying attention to what their sacral really wanted. And they just like practically fly, man. It's so cool.
Oh my
So
goodness.
that's just a couple. Yeah, that's just a couple of examples of how human design can really change your life. And I think your third question had was something about, how can you use this to like determine your life's purpose? And it's really funny that you bring that up because human design actually has that as a built in mechanism. Like there's something called the incarnation cross, which is your conscious sun, your conscious earth, your unconscious sun, and your unconscious earth. They're like planetary placements that determine basically what your life's purpose is. And it's not necessarily like what you're on this earth to do, it's more like who you're put on this earth to be.
Got it. Got it. That's beautiful. You explained that beautifully. I think I'm a generator. At first, I thought I was a manifesting generator, but I think I'm a generator. I got different results the second time I tried
Mm.
to figure it out.
That Yeah, that can happen, especially if you don't know your birth time for sure. In human design, the birth time's a lot more important than it is in astrology. With astrology, you can usually get at least your sun sign, and maybe even your moon sign and a few other things without your birth time. But in human design, it's like we really need to know that because just one single solitary transit can actually change your entire type. So,
Yeah. But going back to the healing, like the conversation that we were having before,
mm,
there's something I forgot to ask you, right? You mentioned
hmm
parasites in our energetic field. And I want to know some more about that. What's going on there? How do we get parasites? And what are the parasites doing?
okay, so the first question or the second question is actually way easier to answer. The parasites are sucking on our light. They're using our light to grow into bigger parasites, and there's actually like a whole life cycle that goes along with these things. But that's like the really simplistic answer is they're literally sucking on our life force and our light. And so and you can really tell when it's happening too. So that's what they do. Now, how we get them is kind of complicated, and it can happen in a myriad of ways. So, like if we talk about the mind parasites, those are generally things that we either made ourselves or attracted with our own negative thought forms, and that's a very common thing. We'll ruminate on some sort of negative thought form. We're worrying about something, and that will attract parasite into our mind, and it starts basically sucking on our life force and encouraging us to keep worrying about that thing so it can keep parasitizing us. And so it's just like this never ending cycle that just keeps happening over and over again. So that's kind of how the mind ones work. Now, we get them in various areas of our body. So that's one way that it works. Another way that it absolutely works is that people, literally incarnated individuals just like you and me, will send them to us. It's kind of like a curse. It's mean. Like some people suck, just is what it is. Um, and that can happen. They can just as easily be removed as a mind parasite. It's not usually like a big deal, but some people suck, and they will send you a parasite because they don't like you or something. They're not usually doing it like on purpose. It's like this is very much where we get the concept of a curse or a hex or a jinx or that kind of thing. It's usually someone sending us one of these things.
Mm.
So that's another way. And then what's also super common is we will get them while we're traversing the astral realm. Uh, and that definitely does happen. And that's usually where we get some of the bigger ones because they're just kind of wandering around, and we've ended up in a lower realm, and that's where they hang out. And we had a bad dream, and now there's a parasite on our foot. And again, not that hard to remove, not that big of a deal, but it is a thing that happens. And then some of the weaker ones that are a little bit more unusual, we can get just walking around in the world. And those most people can just remove themselves, quite frankly. You do a little bit of sage and they're gone. No big deal.
Okay, so tell me, how do you know if you have a parasite attached to you? Well, I can take a lucky guess, right? But I want you to tell us, in more details, or, maybe better than I can, how we can tell if we have a parasite attached. Like, what are the symptoms?
So, if we're talking a mind parasite, that one's really easy to tell. So, if you find that you've been worrying about something for a little bit now, and then you start worrying about it more and more and more, and it gets more and more and more severe, and like you suddenly are thinking catastrophic things, you probably have a parasite. It's probably really feeding into that loop for you. And yeah, you need to get that removed. um, I don't actually know how to remove it beyond astral reiki. I Because you have to transmute the energy. And like the way that I do it is I like while I'm in my astral body, I will give it just like a little tickle with my index finger so that it will transfer onto me, and then I use the violet flame to transmute the energy. So there's probably a way to do that that's not astral reiki. I just don't know what it is. Um, but you definitely do, if you have access to the violet flame, you want to use the violet flame to transmute that energy, because if you don't, it's just going to reattach itself. And that is the thing is, some energy workers, they do remove these things, but very few energy workers know that they need to transmute that energy. So that is an important step. And the violet flame is great for most of these. Not all, but most. If we're looking at something that's got a little bit more heft to it, you'll usually find that there's pain in that area or a lot of muscle tension, because your muscles, like, they know something's up, and they will tighten themselves to try to protect the body from whatever it is. So that's usually a pretty strong indicator, is like muscle tension in the same area that keeps coming back over and over again, no matter what you do. It's tightening because it senses danger.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, that definitely put things into perspective, and it makes complete sense. So, thinking about that, like parasites, how we might, I guess, like be influenced by them or affected by them, how can people begin to start thinking about their energetic health then? Like, when we think about the pains that we have in our bodies, and of course, like, there's a plethora of things. There's genetics, there's environment, your mental, emotional
Mhm.
factors. There are just so many things that plays into this. But just like thinking about this, like on a whole, right? How can we then begin to think about our health, um, energetically in any way, so that when we begin to feel things within our bodies? Because I think one thing about living in this world is we have been so detached from our bodies, and like from the things that are happening with us. Even when we feel like something doesn't quite feel right, we tend to ignore it until it becomes like this huge thing, like a really problematic illness for us, right? um Whereby you can no longer ignore it. But when it's like little pains and pinches and tinges here and there, we tend to kind of like ignore that, pop a pill, go on about our day. So, like, from your perspective and from the work that you do, I'd love to know how we can begin to think about the way that we take care of ourselves, or health, or energetic well being, and all of that.
So there's a lot of different ways that you can go about it. If we're just talking about really thinking about your energetic health, I think starting to actually do that is a good first step. Most of us don't. I know it took me years to even consider that as a thing that you would even need to think about. So starting to actually contemplate it is a good place to start, and figuring out if there's something that you want to do about it in the first place. And if you decide that you do, then I think a next step is actually to tune into your body, and specifically your feet, because your feet are all the way at the bottom of your body. And what we tend to do is we dissociate, and championship dissociation over here. Like, I spent all of my 20s in a really severe amount of pain, and I got really good at dissociating from it. So no shade. Like, very much understand. But learning to actually tune in to what actually is painful really helps. And to start with your feet brings you back into your body, because when we're dissociating, one of the most common ways to do that is to just kind of elevate ourselves out of our bodies. It's like we're all kind of half in, half out. So if you tune into your feet, then you're really bringing yourself back into your body and bringing your focus down all the way to the bottom of your body. And you really kind of assess the skin, like on your toes. Is it scratchy? Your muscles, like, are they stiff or are they flexible? Can you move your toes the way you're supposed to be able to move your toes? Can you roll your ankles? Can you, like, move the arches of your feet? And what does it feel like if you touch your feet? Does that feel gross to you? Like, the concept of touching your feet, is that, like, do you get the ick from that? That's information to have. And just all of these different things to really focus in all the way to the bottom of your body. And then once you do that, once you really focus in on the bottom, then you can work your way up. How do your ankles feel? Is there like a twinge in one of them that, like, maybe you rolled your ankle 6 years ago and that just never really went away, and you've just, like, incorporated it into your daily life, but could actually use a little bit of love? Like, maybe you need a little olive oil there or something. And just, like, working your way up. How are your calves? How are your knees? Do they actually hurt? Did you need to stretch? When was the last time you stretched your hamstrings? How's that feel? Just really focusing in on the body and figuring out what your body feels like in the first place, and just go all the way up.
Yeah, yeah, that's very good advice. Thank you so much for that. I love you for you to talk about some of what you're currently working on. Like, is there anything that you're working on outside of the work that you're doing, helping others on their healing journeys?
If we're talking hobbies, I enjoy rock tumbling, which might be why I have more crystals than I probably should. And, and I love to read. So,
That's
my
cool.
husband's an alchemist, and uh, yeah. And so I have been reading a little bit on alchemy so we can have deeper conversations on the topic, and that's been really interesting. It's been very interesting to see the parallels between the alchemical work that he does and the energetic work that I do, and like just there's so much crossover, and so I've been getting to know my husband better through alchemy, and that's been super fun.
That's amazing. One other thing I wanted to ask you is you mentioned the violet flame, and I wanted you to talk about that a little bit. What is the violet flame? How does that come about in the work that you're doing?
Um, so the violet flame, it's a fairly literal name. It's literally purple fire. So that's what it is, and it has a lot of really significant transmutation power. That's really what it's there for, is to transmute negative energies and send them into the light, uh, for things that aren't quite ready to go to the light in their current form. So like the parasites, they're born of negative thought forms, so they need some transmutation in order to go back into the light where everybody wants to be. So that's kind of what it's used for. As far as its origins and where I got it, I was actually in with that same acupuncturist who's really pretty incredible, and she used the violet flame in one of our sessions. And in human design, I have something called an undefined spleen. So whenever someone uses something spiritual, it's very easy for me to see how they did it, and just like replicate that and probably build on top of it. So when she used it, I saw how she used it, and it was like, oh, that's really cool. I could incorporate that into my work too. So I played with it for a while and contacted Master Saint Germain, who is the keeper of the violet flame, and we did a little confab, and I learned how to use it. And yeah, it's instrumental in the work that I do, actually. So,
That's beautiful. Are there any direct teachings that you've received from any of the ascended masters that you implement in your work or that you would like to share that could be helpful?
hmm. I mean, that is such a good question, and I hesitate to say, because like the ascended masters that I talk to, I feel like there's a lot of ego that goes along with talking to ascended masters, and like saying that you're in communication with ascended masters, and so I struggle because I have met a lot of people who say that they are in contact with Yeshua or Jesus or Terra, and I wouldn't want to be associated with them, but those are generally the people or the ascended masters that I have been in contact with, and I guess I can't really change that. Um, but as far as Yeshua and Tara go, it's it's very much just heal with love. It's all about love. It's all about compassion. It's all about authenticity. They don't really have anything more original than anybody else has to say, because the answers are very basic. Um, Yeshua really did help up my healing power, and taught me a lot more about how to heal things physically than I knew before. He actually taught me a lot about the meridian system, and how that works, and how things are far more connected than I gave them credit for. So that's been a lovely experience, but it really is, I mean, it's really just love. It's really just authenticity. So,
That's beautiful. Um, Is there anything that you would like to share that we haven't touched on so far?
Hmm. We have covered a lot. Uh, so I suppose I would want to talk just a little bit about projectors, if I could,
Of
um,
course.
in
I'm all
human design,
ears.
because we didn't touch on. Okay, we didn't touch on projectors, and they're about 20% of the population, and they are my fellow non-sacrals. So I just, like, as a general message for all the projectors out there, take a nap. It's okay. You're allowed to take a nap. It's okay to rest. You do not have the same energy as everybody else. You're not making it up in your head. It's okay to take a nap. And you know what? That's true for everybody. Don't let capitalism control you. Take a nap. Join the revolution. Take a nap.
Yes, yes, I subscribe to that message. I love that. That's a beautiful message. It's like really intriguing how you've been able to blend the Reiki with the human design and how you kind of use the both of them to inform the work that you do to help people to heal and in any other way, right? Getting rid of parasites or what have you. But I feel like that is such a loving thing to do. Like you mentioned, love. It is such a loving thing to do, and I'm here for it. Um, I don't know. Like, is there anything else that you can tell us about how these things can work together um, to help us? Is there any other deeper understanding you can also give us as to how you implement these things when you're working on your clients and some of the other things that it could potentially help us with when it comes to our own healing?
Mm. You know, with human design especially, and this is true for Reiki, but I contend to a lesser extent. With human design especially, there's this incredible level of self-acceptance that it offers that I just think is really beautiful, that you don't get with a lot of other systems. Most systems, like whether we're talking about astrology or Ayurveda or yoga or Tai Chi or whatever, it doesn't even matter. Reiki, even, like, it aims so much to tell you what to do. And one thing that I absolutely love about human design, and don't get me wrong, like, just like anything else, it can be used to tell you what to do. And we can get cultish about it, and there are definitely problems. But at the base of human design is your strategy and authority. And that is so much of an inner work kind of thing. It is inner discernment, it is inner authority, and really there to help you cultivate your own discernment and your own authority so that you do not have to look to astrology or some guru who probably assaulted somebody to really get your spiritual medicine. It's all coming from you. It is all from within, and there is nothing outside of you that can really do anything that you couldn't get from inside of you. And I think that is something that human design offers that's a little bit more on the unique side. um, that it really is an internal mechanism and an internal process to help you get to know yourself and your own discernment and your own authority.
Yeah, I love that. I love the sound of that. It's, like healing is our own responsibility. And that's something that I've been saying a lot
Mm-hmm.
lately, because we tend to look outside ourselves for so much, for help, for healing, waiting for a savior. And of course, like, no one is saying not to go to the doctor if like there's seriously something wrong with you that needs to be looked at and all those things. But it's just to be aware that there are so many other things going on that can sometimes be outside of our awareness because of the disconnectedness that we experience with ourselves. um, when you talk about environmental factors, the way you were raised, like your own traumas, life experiences, genetics, epigenetics, all of these things. There's that aspect, but there's also the emotional aspects. There's also the energetic aspects. There's just like so many things. And so stuff like this can just be a complement to whatever it is you're already doing to help yourself, right? To heal yourself. So yeah, I think that it's really important work because, as you said before, everything is connected. Everything is connected. So all of these systems within our bodies, within our energy fields, they work together. Whatever is in our energy field um, can get manifested into our bodies physically. Whatever is going on in our headspace can get manifested into our body physically, which is very, very interesting when you think about how deep things get. So yeah, I think it's amazing work that you're doing, Scarlett.
Thank you. It's that's nice to hear, and you're very correct. I mean, even science has caught up. It's one of those now. Even science is saying that like most diseases are born of stress, which is just a fancy way of saying that you created the problem. So
Deal with your emotions, people. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. I don't know. Are you good? Are you comfortable leaving us off here? Or is there anything else you wanted to say? And then you could just wrap up with telling us where we can find you and your work and anything else that you have in store.
I'm feeling pretty complete, so I'm down to wrap up. Yeah, you can find me on my website. That is yourabundantdesign.com. You can also, if it's easier to type, do astralreiki.net. It'll take you to exactly the same place. And feel free to sign up for my newsletter. It's That's pretty much the only place that you'll hear from me. I'm not big on social media, and I only send out a newsletter about once a month. So you will not get spammed, which I feel like is a very nice feature.
Perfect. Thank you, Scarlett.